Ever since I got the Mac Mini M4, I've tested out a lot of docking stations for it. And the more I test out on the channel, the more emails I get from companies saying, hey, would you like to check out our docking station too? And while I can't say yes to all of them, I did say yes to this one, and this comes to us from Wokyis. And I believe that's how you pronounce the name. If it's not, I apologize, but I did watch a video from them, and I think that's kind of what they said. And as you can see, this is a Mac Mini M4 docking station, but it makes your Mac Mini look like an old classic Mac. Now, this is the same type of Mac, was the very first type that I've ever used. Of course, it wasn't a nice color screen like this. It was just black and white, or more like black and gray. But I'm excited to test this thing out because it looks pretty cool. It looks like it's got some pretty decent features. So in this video, we're going to be testing this out and get it all set up and see what it looks like. Hey everybody, it's Chris from Family Geekery. Today we're going to be checking out this retro docking station for the Mac Mini M4. And this again comes from this company here, Wokyis, and this came to us for review. As always, this review contains my opinions. The company doesn't get to see the video before I post it, and no money is exchanged hands. So with that being said, let's go ahead and check out this box here. Obviously we've got this Mac Mini, looks like a retro-styled Macintosh, with a nice 5-inch color screen on the front here. Let's see what else we got around the box here. Alright, a list of kind of features. Retro outside, powerful inside. It's got an NVMe enclosure in here with up to 8 terabytes of storage. It's got an SD card reader. Because it's got the SSD in there, it's going to need a USB-C power supply input. It's got multiple UI options for this 5-inch display. I think it's going to have just an HDMI input that we can plug in as a external display from another computer or from the Mac Mini itself. It's got 10 gigabit USB-A and USB-C ports, and yes, that is the HDMI input on the back there. It's not an HDMI output, and then it's got a headphone jack. So we see what comes in here. It says it's got 13 ports total, 1 USB-C host, 1 USB-C power in, 4 USB-As. That's going to be for all your legacy devices. Great for mouse and keyboard and microphones and that kind of stuff. 1 3.5mm headphone jack, 1 NVMe SSD slot at 10 gigabits, 1 USB-C 10 gigabit port on the front. That's nice. 1 HDMI input, the SD and micro SD card slots, and a 5-inch HD display. Now I believe they're coming out with a different version of this, an upgraded version that has 80 gigabit capability. And I'm not sure if that's just for the USB-C ports or if it's for the NVMe speed. Probably, I guess, the host itself is going to be 80 gigabits. But this one that we have here is going to be 10. And yeah, that's about it. So let's go ahead and get this box open and check it out. Alright, so here is our retro docking station out of the box. And it was very well packed in there with some nice foam. And there was even an extra piece of foam here that was sitting right on top of the screen. And of course, we still got a screen protector on here. Let's get rid of that. And let's see what else came with it. We got a couple cables here. I'll explain what all those cables are intended for. And of course, it also came with an instruction manual and some thermal pads here for the SSD that we can install on the back. But let's take a little tour around the device here. Of course, we've got the 5-inch screen right there, front and center. We've got 2 USB-A ports, our 2 card reader slots, and a USB-C port there. Nice and easy to plug things in as this is sitting on your desk. As we rotate this around and look at the back, one thing I'll point out real quick is we've got some brightness buttons up top here, which will affect the brightness of the screen. Now, as far as the ports go in the back, we got 2 more USB-As, perfect for mouse and keyboard. We got that HDMI input that we'll test out. And then we've got our host input and our power input back here, along with a headphone jack. Now, let's take a look at this here real quick. This is the SSD slot. And I was expecting this just to be a little plastic door, but as you take this thing out, it's held in with some pretty hefty magnets right here and here. And of course, here's your M.2 slot for your SSD. And this thing that comes off here, this is like solid metal. Like, this is not plastic. So that's held on there with those magnets, but it's also acting as a heat sink. So once you have your SSD drive in there with some thermal pad here to help conduct that heat outward, this actually has some little radiating fins. Not super big, but I think it'll do a good enough job to keep that temperature a little bit lower for that SSD drive. So we'll go ahead and put a drive in there. I've got this Kingston 1 terabyte SSD that I use for all my docking station tests, so we'll test that out. But then besides that, I'll go ahead and keep this door off for now. We've got, of course, the whole thing here, which looks like its own little Macintosh, but we know the Mac Mini is going to be installed under here. We saw that from the pictures, like right there. So the whole bottom tray here kind of comes off. You got this little place here to kind of pull it out, and it's all held in here with these little kind of friction ball bearings all the way around it. So there's 4 of those that keep this on here. And this plate right here, like, I don't think it's necessary. I think once you put this on top of your Mac Mini, then that's it. So I'm guessing you would only use this if you had this hooked up maybe to a laptop, or if you didn't have the Mac Mini M4, if you had a different type of desktop or laptop that you were hooking this up to, then you would keep that bottom plate on there so that it would, be a nice fully enclosed Macintosh, retro style computer. So I think the design is pretty cool. We'll go ahead and keep this off also. But let's look at these 3 cables that it comes with. And we've got the small one here, which is obviously USB-C to USB-C. This is going to be the host cable. So if you did have this sitting right on top of your Mac Mini, and we're going to test that out, then this is going to go right from one of the ports in the back right to the host port on this docking station. So that brings us to this next one here, which is about 1 meter long. And this is a nice thick USB-C to USB-C cable. This one is intended to go from this docking station to another computer. So like I said, if you had this set up and you didn't have the Mac Mini M4, but you had just another desktop or laptop or a different style of Mac Mini, then you could use this cable to hook this up, and you would have the host cable going to your other computer. And then that leads us to this last one here. This one's a little bit thinner. So I'm assuming this is just power only. And of course we need to have the 5 volts, 3 amps coming into the back here. It does not supply its own power supply. So I'm going to be running that just to this Anchor desktop power supply here. And we'll get that 5 volts going into here. And that's obviously to run the dock and probably power up the screen. But it's nice that they give you enough cables for all your different configurations. But let's go ahead and get an NVMe drive installed in here. And then we'll go ahead and bring this Mac Mini out and get it all set up. Alright, so let's go ahead and get this NVMe drive installed in here. And it comes with a little screwdriver to make this happen, but I'm going to use my trusty Distributo toolkit here that I always use for all these type of projects, because it's got the magnetic tip and I don't want to lose any of these tiny little screws anywhere. So I've got a Phillips 2 bit on there. Of course, I think a Phillips 1 would work also, but the screw was already in here, ready to go, and it looks like we can move that to any of these places depending on the size of your SSD. So let's go ahead and take just the screw out first. Okay, so this is not just the screw, this is the screw and the little holder all in one. I've seen these on the last couple docks that I've tested out. Instead of moving the stud around and then having a screw that goes into the stud, it's just all in one. So we're going to just kind of put that little slot there on the half moon of the SSD itself, and then we'll use that to secure it down. So you got the little notch down here, offset notch, that's going to match up with the offset notch right there. And we're just going to kind of place this in at about a 45-degree angle. And I give it a little wiggle to make sure it's fully seated in there. You want to make sure that you don't see any of your gold contacts, or if you do see any gold contacts, that they're all kind of the same size. And now this is waiting for us to just go ahead and put this little screw stud thing right on here. And then push it down to where that matches up with the little insert there. And let's go ahead and screw that in. And we are secure. So that's all it takes. Now I'm not going to put the thermal pad on here because, like I said, I use this and move it around from docking station to docking station, so I don't want to have to remove those each time I do this. So let's go ahead and get the heatsink here and put that back into place. And that magnet's going to hold that on nice and strong. And the instructions did say make sure you do this when you are not connected to or powered on a computer. So we got the NVMe drive in here. Let's go ahead and get the Mac Mini pulled out here and get it all set up. Alright, so I've got my Mac Mini. It's only plugged into just the wall power. So we're going to go ahead and just slide this right on top. And it is a perfect fit. And it looks great. So let's go ahead and take our host cable here. And we're just going to pick one of these ports in the back. I'll pick the far right one here. And I'm going to go ahead and just route that right to this host cable. So super easy. Let's go ahead and get the power cable here. And you want to plug that into the 5-volt port that's looking for that as an input. And I'll go ahead and kind of route that around here. Now normally this would be going to, your own supplied brick, something like this, Anchor, or any type of 5-volt, 3-amp capable, phone charger or something. I'm just going to plug it right in here to my desktop charger. And hello, our screen is on. So of course it's got no signal right now because nothing is turned on. So let me go ahead and get a mouse and keyboard and let's go ahead and turn this thing on and see what happens. Alright, so check this out. So we just hooked this thing up and all we did was, of course, we had power going into the Mac Mini itself. I plugged the host cable in from the Mac Mini to the docking station, and then I gave power over this cable right here to the docking station itself. And I powered up the Mac Mini, and look, it just works. So I'm not using that HDMI input. It's obviously doing everything right over that USB-C host. And right now, because I have no other monitor hooked up to this, it's just the main screen right here. So obviously it's only a 5-inch screen. So at this resolution, it's going to be a little hard to see things, but it's neat that it just works just how it is. Now, while I've got it just sitting here, already hooked up, ready to go, I do have this showing up here. The NVMe drive is showing up. So let me zoom in a little bit. And this is the NVMe drive that I installed. It's just called NVMe Dock. So I'm just going to do a quick drive test, and I'm not going to use the software for actual doing a drive test. I'm just going to grab these 3 files here, and this is how I usually do what I call a real-world test. I'm just going to grab these 3 files from the desktop and drag them on here, and these are 4K rendered YouTube videos for the channel. So I'm just going to drop them in 3, 2, 1, go. And the real world test, I just kind of see how long it takes. This is not sped up, obviously. This is about, 3, 4, 5 seconds worth of copying over. And this is about 6 gigabytes worth of video, and it copied over that just fine. So with the real world test, I just want to see how long it takes, what it feels like to drag about 6 gigabytes worth of data and get it on that drive. So at that 10 gigabit speed, obviously it's nice and quick. So I'm just going to do the same thing, but in reverse. So let's go ahead and just set up a new folder here. And I'm just going to open up that folder. And we're just going to take these same 3 files from the drive now and drag them over into this folder. And 3, 2, 1, go. And this is going to be obviously the read speed going from the NVMe drive back to the Mac Mini. And it looks about to be the same. It's slowed down a little bit there, but overall, about 10 seconds worth of copying. Maybe a little bit longer. And usually it's slower going the other way, but maybe my drive is just getting a little tired after all the stuff I've dragged onto it. But either way, nice and quick, 10 gigabits. I think the upgraded version of this is going to be a Thunderbolt adapter to get that 40 or 80, depending on what it's hooked up to. So if you've got something that's capable of that, then make the decision if it's worth it to spend a little bit extra to get that version versus this version. And I believe these are going to be on Kickstarter, so I'll leave some links down below on where you can get more information and where you can buy these. But yeah, I just wanted to test out some drive speeds on this thing just as it's sitting, if this was the only thing that you had hooked up to it. Now this is obviously not the normal use case. So let me go ahead and hook up the Mac Mini to another monitor, and that would be kind of the normal use case where the Mac Mini is going to its own monitor, a real size monitor, and then this is going to be set up as the second. So let me get that set up, and I'll be right back. Alright, so now I got it set up as more of a, what I would call normal use case. So I've got the Mac Mini hooked up with an HDMI cable from the Mac Mini just to a regular monitor, and that's showing up here right on the right. And it's just a 1080p monitor. You can see the resolution there. And then we see the docking station over here on the left-hand side, and it looks like it's coming in at a 720 resolution, which is decent for this 5-inch screen. If it was any higher than that, you wouldn't be able to see anything. And then from here, you can change which one is the primary display and which one is a secondary. Now, obviously, this one is still set up as primary. This would not be the normal use case, I would think. I would think the big screen on the desk, your desk monitor would be your normal one, and this would be the side screen. Now, on their website, they have some nifty widgets that you can download to give like a clock display or kind of a photo album or a YouTube, player or something. But as it's a second screen, you can pretty much drag anything you want over there, which I think is kind of nifty because you've got a docking station, obviously, and we know, everybody knows you need to have a docking station with these Mac Minis unless all you have is wireless mouse and keyboard and, USB-C devices, which it comes with plenty of ports for that. But if you've got any legacy devices or anything that you need to plug in USB-A or card readers or something, then you need a docking station. And I've reviewed lots of docking stations with different features, internal storage, HDMI outputs, different USB ports. But this is the first one that adds this nifty screen in here. And you don't need an extra cable. It's just the host cable itself is going to get this display working over USB-C. So I'm having fun with this thing so far. I think the next thing we need to do is test out that HDMI input. Now obviously we would use this cable here to go to another computer, whether it's a Windows computer or just a bigger computer. And this would be our host cable, and then we'd use an HDMI cable to bring the display up here. So I'm going to see if I can get something a little niftier set up. Alright, so check it out. I've got a retro game playing on this retro thing here. I've just got a little Sega Genesis controller set up to this ROG Ally right here. And I'm just going HDMI out from here into this, using it as a monitor. And I tried this with some of the little retro consoles here like this that have an HDMI output, but their HDMI output is so finicky with the Linux system that they run that I didn't get it working in the 10-15 minutes I was trying. So I just grabbed the ROG Ally. Obviously, if you had one of these, you'd play it on the nice big screen, but think about plugging in an Amazon Fire Stick or any kind of Chromecast device into the back of here just over regular HDMI, having this on your desk and using it just to watch some videos or play some retro games. So pretty darn cool. Pretty neat use case. Now the only thing I'll have to say about this is I did have to unplug the host cable to get this to show up as an input. And when I say host cable, I mean host cable from the Mac Mini itself. So I'm sure if I was using that host cable over to a Windows device or something like that, maybe it wouldn't see it as a monitor and it would just use it as a host. But there's no way to select the input of this. We've got the buttons up here which can change the brightness, and they work great. I tried a couple button combinations to see if there was something that would change the HDMI input or the input from HDMI to USB-C. I didn't see that. I didn't see anything in the manual that had any kind of tricks on that. But that being said, let me see what happens. I still have the Mac Mini running, still going to its own monitor. Let me go ahead and plug in the host cable again and see what happens, see if it overrides this HDMI input. Alright, so I've plugged it in. I just noticed on my monitor over there, the Mac monitor, that it noticed an input and it switched its display. So before, this was the primary monitor on the Mac, and when I unplugged it, my monitor over there on my desk, flipped over to the primary, in this case only monitor, and when I plugged the host cable back in, that one just switched over to the secondary monitor, which leads me to believe there's still a primary monitor in here. I'm just not seeing it. So again, tried double clicking, tried pressing both, tried pressing and holding, and couldn't get it to switch. So now if I unplug the HDMI cable, let's see if this Mac desktop comes back. And there it is. So there's the Mac Mini desktop, now set again as the primary. And if I plug my HDMI cable back in, it does not override it. So we don't get the external monitor, in this case the external HDMI input, coming from this ROG Ally back into here until, I'm assuming, we unplug the host. Now, the downside of that is this drive here and all the ports are running over that host cable. So I don't see a way where you could have the computer, this Mac Mini, using all the host ports here and the NVMe drive, but having a monitor input coming from somewhere else. So if you are the manufacturer of this device watching my video, give us a little hotkey here, or give us some little flip switch that I can switch from the HDMI to the USB-C video input, and that would make this thing even more useful. Alright, to summarize this all up and give you my final thoughts, I went ahead and set this thing up the way that I think the normal use case would be. So I've got the Mac Mini turned on, I've got it going to a regular desktop monitor, which is off screen, you can't see that. I've got this monitor set as the extended display, as a secondary display. And I went ahead and just started up YouTube in a browser, dragged it over onto the screen, hit it full screen, and now I've got YouTube, Netflix, whatever I want to watch just on this little screen. And I've got some headphones here plugged into the back here, which they just come over the USB. Of course, you get the headphone port on the front of the Mac Mini right here, but this is going to be just through the docking station itself. So I can be listening to, whatever it is that's playing here on this little screen, and watching on this little screen. The 5 inches is completely fine at this desk distance here. I'm at a normal desk distance from where I'm standing to where this is showing up. And I can be working over there on spreadsheets or, databases or whatever it is that I do for a living. And my boss is happy I'm getting all my work done. This thing right here doesn't take up any more space than a normal, Mac M4 docking station. Because I've tested the ones that raise the Mac Mini up above it. I've tested the ones that the docking station sit above it. The ones where the Mac Mini sits sideways like this. So this doesn't take up a whole lot of different amount of space than any of those do. But it gives me a nice little screen to just kind of have something in the background watching while I'm getting my work done. So I think this docking station is pretty nifty. It might be my favorite docking station of all the ones that I've tested out. I've got the NVMe storage in there. I've got all the ports that I need. And I've got a nifty little screen. And it just looks great. So I want to thank Wokyis again for sending this out to me. I'll leave a bunch of links down below on where you can find out more information about this one and the Kickstarter that's going on for it, and the new 8K version or the 80 megabit version that's going to be using Thunderbolt. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this review. If you've got any questions about this, go ahead and drop those down in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. Go ahead and check out the rest of the channel. Got plenty of other reviews on docking stations and some other nifty Mac Mini M4 stuff, along with a bunch of other geeky stuff. But that's going to do it for this one. I thank you as always for watching, and until next time, peace out and geek out.